South Carolina, Oklahoma. Great game. Oklahoma's a 3-point favorite at home. The over-under I have for this one is 4 references to Shane Beamer's time in Norman. You're going to hear about it. You're going to see the picture where he's like, oh, there's the staff picture, and then a little spotlight on Shane Beamer. Yep, that's coming.
Oklahoma's just having to go on a tour of playing all of their ex-players and coaches. It's like one of those like good luck Chuck situations where it's like you got to defeat all your old, or sorry, Scott Pilgrim, where you got to defeat all your old exes before you can find greatness.
Sure, we're gonna have what was it? Bob Stoops is going to get a job somewhere. He's going to get to be like an interim coach at another school. He would never do that. He would only be an interim coach at Oklahoma. But you get what I'm saying. Look, this is different than the Josh Heupel breakup, obviously, because it wasn't necessarily a bitter breakup. I mean, I've talked to Beamer before about his time in Norman, and he really enjoyed it there. And he knows that played a big role in him getting that South Carolina job. But it's a fun storyline. And if SEC Media Days were any indication, it'll be discussed a ton. I think the only questions that Beamer answered at SEC Media Days were about his time in Oklahoma. That Oklahoma media, y'all are all over it. It's kind of crazy, like how much that was really established with his time in the main media room. But dare I say, correct me if I'm wrong here, you might disagree with this. It's a borderline Toby Keith game for Beamer. Borderline. And I know we usually talk about bigger spreads for a How Do You Like Me Now game, but and even though it's not necessarily on Heupel levels, we just talked about the differences, but still, to go back to the place where you were an assistant, you know, not as high in the totem pole, perhaps, maybe, I don't know this for a fact. Maybe he thought that he should have been a more serious candidate for that opening after Lincoln Riley walks off to USC. Maybe he thought he should have gotten more consideration for that. And look, maybe that's going to be factoring into his mindset. Who knows? But to win this game would be really big for him. This could turn into I don't want to say a street fight. I don't want to say a rock fight because that discounts this a little bit too much. Somewhere in between a street fight and a rock fight. Make of that what you will. It's in the eye of the beholder probably. But I can guarantee you that there is no way that the average college football fan can name more than one receiver who's playing in this game. Think about that. And I'm talking about Oklahoma with the injuries, by the way, not Oklahoma at full strength. But
yeah, man, that's rough.
Like Nick Harbor, he's the number one freak. Outside of that, good luck because Brent Venables said that Deion Burks is working to quote defy all odds to be able to play this game at about 80% after the injury he suffered against Tennessee. That was a soft tissue injury, by the way.
Love to hear that, especially as a defensive coordinator. It's like, hey, we just get one lick on this guy. He's defying all odds to be here.
Right. And I think Venables said that because there have been murmurs of, oh my gosh, are some of these receivers holding out and redshirting and sitting out the rest of the season? That's been kind of the word of like, oh, are these guys doing this? And that's why we're not seeing them come back. I do not think Deion Burks is doing that. I do not think, and maybe I'll be proven wrong on that, but that there are some, oh my God, is this going to be a Juice Wells situation or something like that? But I do think that Burks, he is the type of player whose availability, given what we know about the scarcity of the position for Oklahoma, I think it could move a line in this one. So if you're betting on this, obviously be very mindful of that. We're recording this Wednesday afternoon, but we really haven't seen Deion Burks and Michael Hawkins Jr. yet. You know, he gets hurt in that Tennessee game, and Hawkins, of course, has his 2 starts since then, but he could use him. That's very obvious. I don't care if those guys don't have a rapport at all. And if Burks has spent like 0 time working with him because obviously Jackson Arnold was getting those first team reps, whatever, just get a guy out there. We talked about that with Auburn. Just get a guy out there that knows how to handle his business against SEC corners. But based on that defy all odds breakdown, I would not assume that Deion Burks is back and playing in this one. Maybe he will defy all odds, but I wouldn't necessarily hold out hope that that's going to be the case. If you can believe it, Will, this has actually been kind of a good spot for Oklahoma after the Red River rivalry, because I was thinking about this. I was like, you know, emotional loss, like every rivalry loss is considered an emotional loss. So take what you will about that. But they haven't lost the following game after Red River since 2014. Playing a variety of opponents too.
Yeah, that's actually pretty. Yeah, that's a nice little trend right there.
Sometimes they've had a bye week, but I just said following game, so I still include. I wasn't like, oh, I gave them a pass because they had a bye week. Like, no, they haven't turned it into a losing streak if they've won or lost this game. So if you're looking for some sort of like hangover trend for Oklahoma, that actually kind of goes against it. But I'm going to go with South Carolina to win outright. I'm going to go with them to win outright 21-17 because I just don't know how Oklahoma is going to slow down Kyle Kennard and that South Carolina defensive line. They have just played so unbelievably well. And I get that I said that a couple weeks ago against Ole Miss, and they did a better job of neutralizing those guys and preventing them from taking over the game. But I just think South Carolina has been really good against the run, 17th in the country in yards per carry allowed, some of which is sacks, but still very good. Ole Miss had the most rushing yards against that group this year, 140. And South Carolina, that game, held Henry Parrish and Matt Jones to 3 yards per carry. So it's a good unit. It's a really good unit. And that's been a really nice revelation for Beamer squad. So I'm going to take a bounce back week for South Carolina's offense a little bit, I guess, though it does slightly worry me that Oklahoma's defense tied for first in America with 8 fumbles recovered. If Lenora Sellers is putting those, the zone reads on the ground without anybody touching him, not great. Probably going to be an opportunity that Oklahoma is going to pounce on. But I don't think we get an exact repeat of the Bama game for Sellers, and I think ball security will be better in this one. I think South Carolina ultimately wins.
It's funny. On the last one, I was saying, okay, South Carolina has clearly been the best defensive line in America, and you retorted with, okay, well, Tennessee is right there, and you got to start to feel bad for Oklahoma at some point because they have this offense that's so banged up. The offensive line, I think, has played admirably, considering all the, the turnover when you, like if you think about it, man, when you have a freshman quarterback that completely changes the style of your offense, when you have, the guys in and out of the lineup as an offensive line, and also, a rushing attack that hasn't really had, the consistency that we expected from a guy like Sawchuk, right? So it's been a committee, but I think they've been fine enough. But fine enough doesn't cut it against South Carolina, nor did it against Tennessee. So, yeah, you want to be able to establish something, when the offense is kind of the way it has been. And again, this offense has played admirably. I just want to keep using that word because it's all based on expectation, right? It's like when Arnold doesn't really pan out the way that you think, when the receivers are all hurt, when the running back room isn't what you thought it would be, all you can really do is the best you can, right? And this rushing attack has been solid, not great, obviously. And so point being, I think that's bad news when you look at a South Carolina front that just frustrated a much more talented Alabama front that's been improved from last year. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that something about this season just tells me that Beamer is going to do something. Like I said, that's why I kept harping on it about Alabama and LSU last week with South Carolina. It's like they have to win one of these games. They have to win in several of these games, honestly, because like I said, I feel like they are building something, but you can't just keep taking moral victories in the SEC. So Oklahoma is a team that, again, their defense is, I think, good to very good, but their offense, like we've talked about, is just so limited that it's going to stay out on the field. So, you have to give the South Carolina offense lots of chances, but I think Oklahoma is going to do that, and that's why I'm liking South Carolina.
Well, you know how I do my annual Due to Deserve Better team? Mm-hmm. That'll be coming out. I think the plan is going to be later in the week, next week on SDS. Might just put the entire Oklahoma defense because they got a really upperclassman laden group, and I feel for that group. I do, because they did everything they could to kind of keep their head above water in that Texas game. And then
that Bowman pick was so sick.
Oh man. That when that happens to start the game, you've got to be thinking like this is our time. This is going to be like a 17-14 type game. If you're Oklahoma, this is playing into our cards. And then once the dam breaks, man, it's tough. It's tough to get it to stop. And it just takes that one big chunk play. And even the Tennessee game, the Dante Thornton throw, which by the way, I'm gonna reference that in a second here. The Dante Thornton throw that Nico makes in that game. I mean, Oklahoma had really done a nice job to that point in the first half, I thought, doing some things to kind of frustrate Tennessee, and they weren't necessarily getting into the rhythm that we had talked about, at least to that point in the season. And I just feel like that group just has had that one moment in every game where it's been like, man, we did all we could. We did all we could. We promise we're doing our best. This is not from a lack of effort here. So yeah, Oklahoma defense. I promise you will be heavily featured in the SEC Due to Deserve Better team in 2024.